Welcome back. Today we are going to be taking a look at the American F-8E, and this is right now probably one of the best planes to fly at 10.3. Why is that, you might ask? It's pretty simple. It's not because it's the best in speed, it's not because it's the best in turn rate, it's not because it has the best missiles or the best guns. This is one of those planes that can basically do a little bit of everything. Sure, it's a little bit on the slow side, and that's its main drawback. And of course, if you are familiar with the F-8U that's in front of it, you should be familiar with the ability to just absolutely blow your balls off if you go in too tight of a maneuver. This thing fixes most of that, and you can dogfight almost every plane at this BR bracket if you fly it right. The "if you fly it right" phrase is a phrase that I like to avoid, and that's mainly because 9 out of 10 times the plane kind of flies itself for you, as long as you don't make critical errors in your flying style. With the F-8E, it's all about energy and retention, and this is a concept that's not really too common in this kind of BR bracket, because most of the vehicles just like to just shit away all of their speed very quickly. Planes like the MiG-21s and basically everything that pulls a lot of AOA, they're just extremely common, and it's very easy to get caught with your pants down. And if you then also start to panic a little bit because you are not sure what to do, he's going to pull down your underwear as well, and he's going to roleplay as your uncle. You want to avoid this at all costs, so you do need to make sure that you know how to use your low speed retention as well as your high speed retention. But I have some examples of that later in the video. Later in the video I also have some questions to you guys, basically everyone that watches, because I have a few ideas and I would like to hear your opinion on it. But first, the gameplay. Because I'm pretty confident that most of you guys are not here for my boring update, but we'll get there when we get there. The F-8E is one of those planes that you kind of need to look for target. People 9 out of 10 times need to come to you. Most of your enemies are going to be a lot quicker than you, and if they aren't, then you can of course dogfight them, but that's a recipe to get third party. So I like to play this thing like a missile bus most of the time. Just kind of loiter around the battlefield. You can go in it, you can go around it, it doesn't really matter. Just look at what teammate needs help, who needs to be cleaned up, and who is presenting himself for you. Because if you go into a furball of like 3 or 4 people, and there are some planes in there that can go faster than you, and they decide to pressure you, chase you, you're gonna have an issue. Because even though this thing is great at retention, even though it's great at turning, if you go too slow, if you get caught up with too many people, sure, if the fight goes on for long enough, you'll win that fight eventually if they miss enough shots. However, most of the time people will get their shots off before that happens, and you're still there with your pants down with your uncle behind you. You don't want that to happen, so we are going to be trying to avoid that. The nice thing is, if you get singled out, sometimes that happens, like with the MiG-21 right here, you can defend yourself. And in this kind of turn, if I keep this up, it might look like he's pulling lead on us, it might look like he's about to get shots on us, but we can keep that turn up all day long, and he will kind of turn inside of us, but he's gonna lose so much speed that we can do two things. We can either continue to go into that kind of manner, just kind of keep turning, go slightly up when he goes slow enough, and it might look like he's about to get shots on you, but trust me, he is not gonna be hitting it most of the time. It's a little bit risky, but with vehicles like this you need to take some risk, otherwise you are not gonna be getting kills. This is not one of those brain dead boom and zoom planes, so with that comes always a little bit of risk. But if there's multiple people around, this is of course not advisable, because you are just going to be third partied and you want to avoid that. The second option is just loop the guy for like 1 or 2 turns, and then you can simply just run away. The third option is of course that they run away, but that's fine too. You are just completely depressurized, if we can call it that. You don't need to go to the bottom of the ocean to look at the Titanic, so you can just run away, and he's probably gonna go slow enough to get missiled by a friendly. And that's the beauty of this thing. You can kind of play this thing however you want, and as long as you adhere to the basic principles of this plane and you don't full send it after the first person, you're gonna have a pretty decent time in it. Now, of course, the gameplay that I'm showing you in the background is kind of boring, and I can't really help that, because that's just how this BR bracket is as of right now. There's a lot of attackers, there's a lot of premiums, and this just kind of makes it so that you either fight bad planes or bad pilots, and both of those are pretty easily abusable by a vehicle like this. And as of right now, I think this is still probably the best plane to grind higher tiers with. The 10.3 bracket is fantastic when it comes to the matchmaker, and this is one of those planes where you can kind of do whatever you want with it. Sure, you have the F-8E as well and the F-5C, and I do think for the average RLB match, the F-5E is better. However, this thing is, I think, more fun, and it makes me like ARB a little bit more. And you might ask, why is that? Because this thing is better at turning with 3 or 4 people at once. Sure, the F-8E is a slightly better plane. However, I think that this thing is more fun, and it's better at dogfighting like 3 or 4 people at the same time, because it just doesn't really lose speed at those lower speeds. The F-8E, if you go slow enough, you will start actually bleeding enough speed to the point where you kind of become a sitting duck. This thing doesn't really get to that point. But again, I do think that the F-8E is better, especially if you are a newer player, or if you only have 1 or 2 top tiers. It's a much more forgiving plane to fly. This thing, however, it just kind of feels more rewarding to me. It might just be me, it might just be preference. If you are really on the fence, you kind of just want to be casual about it. You also want to bomb sometimes, you also just kind of want to send it in. Dogfight the first guy, maybe use it in ground RB as well. The F-8E is just better. Let's get that out of the way. But you can't really go wrong with either. Another thing for me is that you have another F-8E in another tech tree, so if you ever need to grind with it, you can do it with that vehicle. It gives you a little bit more of a diversity. So, Su-25, we crit him, and I really don't want him to reach his base again. So we put a little bit of pressure on him. Luckily the pressure gets enough, and his 250,000 submarine turns into an implosion. He hits a tree. And then the last Su-25 ends up in front of us. We are going to be pre-flaring a little bit, shoot some rounds in the head-on, and the second I get past the head-on, it's over for him. I'm just going to drop my throttle a little bit, mainly because I don't have the most amount of fuel, and I know I can catch him anyway, and I don't want to run out directly behind him. But then he goes vertical, and he's going to make our life hella easy to just gun him down. There we go. Jeffrey Epstein, and on to the next game. Now, let's look at some examples where we fight a MiG-21. MiG-21s are one of those planes that you will run into very often, and if you don't really know how to deal with them, they can be rather tedious. And that's mostly because they pull quite hard, their nose just kind of goes wherever it wants to, and it bleeds a lot of speed, so it's very easy for the MiG-21 to turn inside of your circle. But what I like to do is open up the first loop a little bit, just like we do right here. We're going to make it so that he needs to fly a little bit further to get near us, and this is going to allow us to open up the gap. And when we start opening up the gap, we get a little bit of distance between us, and when we get more distance, he can't really use his guns in the first 1 or 2 turns. And right now we went from an energy disadvantage to having him energy trapped, and he is forced to simply run away, which is exactly what he's going to be doing. The unfortunate reality here is that he is too high, for us anyway. He's high enough for himself to kind of just dive away, get his speed up, and the second he goes over Mach, I won't really be able to chase him. I'm just going to be sending my missiles at him. He goes into the clouds, and I try to go a little bit vertical to land on top of him, but he sends it away again. He's going to dive, and he's going to run away. We are never going to be catching him. Here is another interaction between the same MiG-21. This is a little bit earlier in the game, and we are going to be doing the exact same thing. We're going to be pulling up to him. I'm not really bothered about getting the first shot in. I just want to make sure that I bleed him of his speed. Right now I noticed that he didn't turn in instantly, so I'm going to keep the loop a little bit closer. And I also don't want to go too slow, because there's multiple enemies around and I don't want to set myself up for disaster. So for right now I'm keeping it relatively horizontal, and I'm just trying to bleed him of speed and then run away, which is exactly what we just did. And this is what I meant earlier. You can bleed them quite handily and then just disengage. The Su-25s are now a decent margin away, and they don't really seem to be interested regardless. So what do? We open up the loop again. I'm going to make him turn for as much as possible, and I'm trying to fly straight for as much as possible. And when he gets close enough, I'm again going to put it in a little bit of a spiral. And as I mentioned earlier, it might look like he's gaining on us, but this guy is about to stall out. He is cutting inside of our loop, and we are going 650. Which means that he is trying real hard to get a shot on us, and right now he's out. He is completely out of energy, so we can roll up and over. And if he sticks this fight, he will die. But what does he do? He does the right thing, and he can simply disengage. This is the main issue when you are fighting people in the F-8E. And you notice this in the F-5E as well. People can kind of just run away from you, which is extremely annoying, but you have to keep in mind that if they don't, they will simply lose. So fair play to this guy. Helped me tremendously in showing the difference in ability of these vehicles. But we are gonna meet him one more time. And I just realized that all these clips are out of order, but it doesn't really matter as it's not really about the full game anyway. Here we have the same guy one more time. And if I fly it right, and if he flies it right, it essentially becomes a stalemate. Well, I think he can kill me, because he has more options in terms of speed and disengaging. But it's rather annoying to fight each other nonetheless. Long range shot with the AIM 9D doesn't connect, and he is going to start turning. And when he starts turning before us, I've already won this fight if he doesn't disengage. Now he's going to try to pull up into us, and he is going to succeed, and this is what I meant with the AOA and the speed bleed. It looks very scary, but trust the process, trust in your plane, and you will stall him out. Now the issue is I lose him in the clouds here, but I hope that it's a clear picture of what it's like to fight a MiG-21. And that's it really. Now I had a question for you all, as I promised at the start. And the question is, I don't want to make free advertising, so I'm going to not name them as of right now and not link them either. Is anyone familiar with the free GE app? They have proposed a sponsorship. I haven't really heard anything bad about it. And because I'm going to go full time in August, I want to increase my income just a little bit to actually make it livable. So if you have any bad news on them, do let me know, because I don't want to make or promote a bad company. And as a little bit of an update, the radar guide thingy is about 85% done, so expect that relatively quickly. Thank you all for watching, and you'll see me in the next one.